Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Before we get into today's case, I just wanted to say thank you so much for clicking on this video. Please remember that this video is for informational purposes only. Please like and subscribe. It's a free way that you can help me out. Today we will be talking about the case of Els van Doren, which takes us to the Limburg province of Belgium, specifically to the area formerly known as Opglebeek, now known as Oudtsbergen. Els van Doren was born on 1 June 1968 in Antwerp in Belgium. Els was a married mother of 2 children, a son and a daughter. They had a family-run jewelry store which she ran with her husband Jan, and they lived in Randst. Els started skydiving in 1994 with her husband. She absolutely lived for skydiving. Jan eventually gave up skydiving as he was not as passionate about it anymore and got into things like playing football and sculpting. But Els flourished in the sport. She spent most her weekends and any public holiday there. And she was skydiving, which meant that she was away from her family. In 1998, Els started gaining more interest in competing in formation jumping, and in 2001 she joined an all-female skydiving team named the Divas. By this time, she had competed more than 1,000 jumps. The Divas skydiving team even competed at the Skydiving World Championships in 2003. Els left the Divas in 2004 after suffering from a hernia, and when she recovered fully, she decided to focus more on jumping for fun and not for competition. Els had by that time joined the Swartberg skydiving club, and by 2006, she had successfully completed more than 2,300 jumps. At Swartberg, Els van Doren met Els Klottemans, who was in her very early 20s at the time, and was studying to be a primary school teacher, and they became very close friends. The older Els had told people at the skydiving club to start calling the younger Els Babs, as to not confuse the two when they were speaking to them. They also became close friends with another Dutch skydiver, Marcel Somers. The three were great friends and became jumping partners at one point. Els van Doren and Marcel's relationship over time evolved into a romantic one, although Els was still married at the time. She spent most weekends away from her family, skydiving and hanging with Marcel, either at the skydiving club or at his apartment. The married mom had some extracurricular activities that included more than just jumping out of a plane. What Els did not know was that she did not just share a first name with the younger Els, but they were sharing the same man, Marcel. Marcel had been having a relationship with both of them, and had a specific day that he had spent with each of the women. On Fridays, he spent the night with the younger Els, who we would refer to as Babs, and on Saturdays he spent his time with Els van Doren. One weekend turned out a little bit different than the schedule Marcel had put in place. On Friday, 10 November 2006, Babs arrived to see Marcel as she usually did for their Friday rendezvous. Els van Doren usually arrived to Marcel's home on a Saturday, but she decided to surprise him and came straight from work on the Friday. Young Babs was already out for dinner with Marcel at the time, and when they got to his apartment, they saw Els van Doren standing there and waiting for Marcel. It was Babs's night to spend with Marcel, but that night it wasn't the young Els that shared his bed, which left Babs sleeping in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, which was very close to where Els van Doren's parachute and other jumping gear was kept. On 18 November 2006, Els, Marcel, Babs, and another skydiver named Tom were set to jump in a 4-person formation at 13,000 feet. 3 of them jumped when the signal was given, but the younger Els seemed to have missed her mark and jumped a little bit later than the others. The other 3 are in free fall, and Babs seemed to not have been able to catch up with them. At 9,000 feet, Els, Marcel, and Tom break formation and they set to open their parachutes. Els van Doren pulls at the cord for her main parachute, but nothing happens. It does not open. She knows the emergency procedures though. Once in her past, she had to pull her reserve parachute when her main did not want to open fully. This time is different. She is still in free fall at a speed of at least 200 kilometers per hour. She has less than 20 seconds left to save herself and to get her reserve open. She pulls at the cord for her reserve parachute to open. At that stage, she is less than 500 meters away from the ground. Her reserve parachute only opens a fraction. It does not want to open fully. She keeps pulling, but it still does not open fully. Marcel is looking to see if he can see Els. He sees her more than 800 meters below him. It was impossible for him to catch up with her, as his chute is already open fully. He can see her main parachute did not open, and he can see her white reserve parachute has not fully opened as well, and then she disappears from his sight. No one is able to save her. Els tries helplessly to untangle the cords of her reserve parachute to be able to fully open it, but she does not succeed. And the worst nightmare of every skydiver becomes a reality. A woman was outside in her garden in Opglebeek, hanging washing, when she heard a whirring sound and a loud thud in her garden somewhere. In the far distance, she saw a parachutist coming down with their parachute from the sky. A sight she had seen many times, as their house was only a few kilometers away from the parachute club and the landing field that they had used. She couldn't understand what made the loud thud though, and started hanging her washing again, when something caught the corner of her eye. She saw a white cloth lying on top of her shrubs. It looked no bigger than a pillowcase to her, and she thought that one of the neighbors' pillowcases must have blown into their yard. She went a little closer to go and pick it up, and that's when she noticed that someone was lying in her garden in between the bushes. She could see a foot and a leg sticking out from the bushes. She immediately called her husband, who had been busy gardening in front of their house, and he came running. He had a look, and they immediately called emergency services. The person in the garden was Els van Doren. She was still wearing her helmet, but she was not moving or making any sounds. The emergency services arrived on scene and cut away the plants to get to Els. They tried to resuscitate her. Unfortunately, she could not be saved. Marcel had found a safe place to land, and he lets out a guttural scream. He starts running down the streets, yelling for help and trying to see if he could figure out where Els had landed. He sees an ambulance driving down the street towards a house and starts running after it. When he arrives at the house, he runs into the back garden and sees Els lying there. He starts crying and screaming uncontrollably. He was very upset and wanted to go to Els. A few people had to hold him back. He kept shouting, "No one touch the parachute. We need the parachute. This is not normal." He kept saying, "There was something wrong with her parachute. There was something wrong with her parachute." He kept shouting Els's name and crying. At one point he got to her, and he took her phone from her bag, and he decided to call Els's husband Jan to tell him what had happened. The police got on the phone and told Jan that his wife could not be saved, and that she had sadly passed away. Jan was beside himself. Marcel then proceeds to phone the owner of the parachute club to tell him that there had been an accident and that Els had passed away. The owner of the club has never lost anyone from this club due to a skydiving accident before. Els's husband and sister are driven to the scene by his brother. He had been in such a state that he had been unfit to drive himself. Tom and Babs arrived back at the parachute club after landing at the designated drop zone, where they were then picked up and transported back to the club by the club's van. The owner of the skydiving club calls everyone that was at the club to tell them that he has an announcement. He tells them that there had been an accident that involved Els, and that her main parachute and reserve parachute did not open. While everyone tries to still process the news and asks questions, Babs falls down to the ground on her knees and starts crying hysterically. The owner then informs everyone that Els had passed away. A while later, Els's husband arrives at the club to pick up her items that she had left there. Babs lets him know that she will go fetch them for him. He said that she was very unemotional and had a weird grin on her face which he finds very eerie. Babs goes to the change room and he follows, but she locks the door behind her so he could not enter. She took a very long time before she came out with Elsa's items, and she hands them to him. Back at the scene, the police claim Elsa's parachute as well as the film from a helmet camera, and the coroner takes away her body. An autopsy was done on Els, and it was determined that she had not been under the influence of alcohol or any drugs. Her death was determined to be either a murder or a suicide. Her body was not punctured in any way. She died due to multiple fractures and internal bleeding after the impact that she had suffered. Elsa's family had been devastated after her death, and all fingers started pointing towards the case looking like a homicide. The family had been thinking that if this had been a homicide, it must have been someone that Elsa had known from the club, that had extensive knowledge of parachutes. The members of the club were asked not to come to Elsa's funeral service because of this. Elsa's father said that he does not want to shake hands with anyone that might be a possible murderer. This was ignored by some though, as 3 members of the club, including Babs, had shown up to say goodbye to Els. The family were also upset due to the fact that they had to find out from the police that Els had been having an extramarital affair with Marcel for more than 5 years. Everyone from the skydiving club knew about this. Some of them had also known Jan from when he had also been a skydiver, and no one had thought to make him aware of this. Later, it was made known that the club members had been told that Els and Jan had been separated. To the club manager, she had said that she had a nice time with Marcel on the weekends, and during the week she enjoys her time with her family, and that she compartmentalizes her 2 worlds, and no one had to know. Her funeral was held the day before the 15th birthday of Elsa's daughter Carol. In tears, Carol said, "How often did we not whine that you need to stop jumping? We felt so bad sometimes that you were not home like the other moms on a Sunday, and you were out again jumping out from another plane. But it was actually a good thing. You were unique. I don't know any other mom that would jump out of a plane. Suppose I got you to stop. Then you would have been unhappy. The dimples in your cheeks would have disappeared, and I would not have wanted that." At the funeral, her sister also spoke and said, "You did all you could during your final jump to save yourself, but someone did not want you to live." Questions remained regarding the death of Els. The main parachute not opening was one thing, but the fact that a reserve parachute also failed raised a lot of eyebrows. Investigation started on the case quickly after Elsa's funeral. A professional that had extensive knowledge regarding parachutes was called in to evaluate the parachute and to see if anything had been amiss. After only one check, he noticed that Elsa had been missing a very crucial part of her parachute, the pilot chute. It was a small black parachute that allowed the main parachute to detach and deploy. The pilot chute is tied to the main parachute with one long piece of ribbon. It is an integral part of the jumping equipment and cannot just disappear. It was searched for in gardens and surrounding areas of where Elsa had fallen, but it was not found. It was also confirmed that neither the ambulance, coroner, or the fireman had removed it with them. Another determination that was made was that there had been clear tampering with her parachute. The drawstring of the pilot chute that should activate the main chute had been cut, and one of the hanging straps of the emergency parachute was also cut. In the video, a strange red object is seen flying in front of Elsa's face, and it does not seem like something that belongs in a parachute. The investigation team urged the residents of Opglebeek to look in their gardens for the possible red or orange object. It looked like a long piece of fabric. They asked them to treat it carefully, as it might contain evidence or DNA of the person that had sabotaged the parachute. Unfortunately, none of the residents had found it. The investigators also found out that Els van Doren's parachute was due for inspection with her rigger no later than 20 November for her 4-monthly inspection. A parachute rigger is someone who is trained to inspect, repair, and maintain and pack a parachute for someone. The rigger is the only person who is allowed to open, unfold, and refold a parachute for a jumper. whoever committed the crime must have known that the rigger would be inspecting the parachute of Els on the day that it was mandatory to have the parachute inspected, which was the 20th of November, and it has to be done every 4 months, otherwise you would not be able to skydive. And then, miraculously, the pilot chute is found on the Monday after Els's death, by none other than Els Klottemans. She was on her way home from Marcel's apartment in Eindhoven to Genk, where she was set to make a statement to police, when she saw it in a tree near Zwartberg, more than 20 meters up. She says she saw it by chance when she was stuck behind a tractor. She doesn't phone the police though. She phones Marcel to tell him about finding the chute. Marcel immediately phones the police to go out to where Els had found the chute. When they get there, Els is hysterically crying and very emotional. The firemen carefully collect the pilot chute from the tree, as it may contain critical evidence needed by the police. Police are suspicious about how Els seemed to have found the pilot chute by chance. She says that she got lost because of a reroute from the route that she normally takes from Marcel's home, and was stuck behind a tractor. She was driving very slow, and when she looked up, she just saw it hanging there. From the street, the policeman and the fireman said that it looked like a black paper towel in a tree. She states that it must have been a sign from Els in heaven, so they can help catch her murderer. But the police were suspicious and didn't think that Els was trying to give her any signs from heaven. They believed that she knew the pilot chute was caught in the trees when Els was falling to her death. Who would have known to even look for the pilot chute anyways? Everyone had thought that it was with the investigators already. No one apart from the investigators even knew that it was missing. The police immediately identify 3 possible suspects: the husband, Jan de Wilde, the secret lover, Marcel Sommers, and the other woman, Els Klottemans. Marcel was quickly eliminated as a suspect, which left the police looking at Jan and Els Klottemans. The police find out that an anonymous letter had been sent to Els van Doren's home the previous year. It was addressed to Els, but Jan had intercepted it. It stated, "Do you know what you are doing to your husband and children?" The letter was not written by hand, but typed out and printed. At that time, Jan didn't read much into it, as he thought that the person had been talking about the fact that Els had been leaving them every weekend to go skydiving, which had been a bone of contention in the family, and he then tore it up. Els thought that it might have been her brother-in-law, who often had something to say about her weekends away and about leaving her family to go skydiving. Nothing is mentioned about an extramarital affair in the letter. Marcel also notified the police that him and Els had been receiving anonymous calls every now and then when they were together. First they would phone Marcel's phone, breathe, and put the phone down, and just a few seconds later Els would receive a call, in which the person would do exactly the same thing, and then they would drop the call. On 30 November 2006, the police seized items from Jan's house, including electronics and diaries, etc. He is also questioned by the police. At Els Klottemans' house, that she says shares with her mom and brother, they seize her laptop, a diary, and a book of fillings that her psychiatrist had asked her to keep track of. They asked her to go with them to the police station to be questioned further, and they wanted to find out more regarding her relationship with Els van Doren, Marcel, and the day of Els's death. Els maintains that she had nothing to do with sabotaging Els van Doren's parachute. She maintains that it must have been either Marcel, who stayed with her during weekends and kept her gear there, or her husband, that could have sabotaged it while she kept her gear with him in the week. Els is released to go home after questioning. On 20 December 2006, she was set to see the investigators again for a second interview, but she never showed up. When the police follow up, they found out that Els had tried to take her own life that morning. Her mom went to work on the morning, and when she tried to phone Els during the day, she had received no answer. As she left work later, she tried phoning Els again, but still got no answer, which is when she was really starting to worry. She rushed home, and as she entered the house, she ran to Els's room, where she found her unresponsive. Els had taken an overdose of sleeping pills, pain pills, and antidepressants. Her mom was a nurse and she immediately started working on her and phoned emergency services, where Els is rushed to hospital and her stomach is pumped. They are able to save her life. When she decided to end her life, she wrote 4 letters to her mom, her brother, Marcel, and a friend. She also wrote a sort of testament as to what should happen to her after her death. She stated that she had been looking for Els's murderer after her death. She said that she herself wondered why someone would do something like this to her. She said that she had started working as a sort of investigator on the case herself, as she couldn't process that her best friend was dead. She said that she had wanted to find out the truth. She admitted that she was the writer of the anonymous letter to Els that was sent to her house, as well as the anonymous phone calls. She also admitted that she had made herself a suspect by not always telling the truth, but she maintained that she did not do anything to Els's parachute. She stated that she wanted to join her friend and her father in death, and that everything was just too much for her. Els had also not been doing well in her studies at that time. She no longer had Marcel, and she no longer had Els, and now she was also a murder suspect. Her whole world had been imploding right before her eyes. Babs is sent to a psychiatric hospital, where she is kept under observation for 15 days. She had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, as well as depression years earlier, and it was also noted that it was not her first attempt at ending her life. She is released to another care facility in January 2007. Marcel had felt that Babs was not really trying to take her life, and that she did it for attention. He thought that she was acting like she was caught in a web and didn't know how to get out of the situation that she was in. In his opinion, she probably took the pills a short period before she knew her mom was going to come home. On 11 January 2007, Babs turns 23, and she awaits a message or call from Marcel. But nothing comes. Marcel had cut her off. He vehemently started believing that she is responsible for Els's death, especially after finding out that she tried to end her own life. On 18 January, while still under psychiatric care, Els is arrested for the suspected murder of Els van Doren. She is kept overnight and appears in court for the first time on 19 January 2007. The court maintained that there had been enough evidence to suspect Els Klottemans of the murder of Els van Doren. She had been caught in multiple lies. It is decided that she will be kept in custody while the investigation is continued and more evidence is gathered in the case. Els Klottemans was born on 11 January 1984. Her mom worked as a nurse and her father was a roofer. On 2 May 1986, he had fallen from a roof and passed away after being in a coma for 5 days. She had only been 2 years old at the time, and her brother was only 3 months old. Her mom never remarried and tried her best to raise them as a single mom, with the help of the kids' grandmother. She went to school in St. Joseph Institute and enjoyed playing football, and joined a club called FC Diesel for female football players in Ternat. During puberty, she started acting out and went from calm and timid to experiencing great anger and had constant fights with her mom. During her later teenage years, she started self-harming and tried to end her life, which is when she started being treated by a psychiatrist. She was diagnosed with depression and separation anxiety. When Els turned 18, the workers' compensation insurance regarding her father's death was set to start paying out to her. The money had been kept in a trust for her and her brother until they had turned 18, and she was set to earn quite an amount at that point. Up to this point, Els had not had much money to spend, and as soon as she got her license, she bought herself a brand new Peugeot 206. She finished high school and decided to leave Belgium to go to Guatemala for 6 months, to work as a volunteer. She returned home after 5 months. She then enrolled at the University of Ghent to study psychology and education, but she struggled and had to redo her first year after failing. She decided to not continue her studies and decided to rather enroll at EHSAL in Brussels to study for primary education, as her time in Guatemala taught her that she enjoyed working with younger children. In 2003, she discovered a passion for skydiving. She completed one course with a friend in France and went back with him in 2004 to complete a course in freefall. She ended up enrolling at the Zwartberg Club. Her first jump on 5 September 2004 was not quite successful. She ended up in a bush in Opklabeek, as her parachute got tangled to a treetop, and the fire and rescue had to come and free her. There was even a picture put in the newspaper of her with 2 firemen that freed her from the tree. The club is where the 2 Elses got to know each other. Els van Doren took Els Klottemans under her wing. The younger Els could speak to the older Els about everything that she had been feeling and experiencing psychologically, and the older Els listened and gave her advice. The younger Els was very aware of the relationship that the older Els had had with Marcel. They were regularly seen kissing and hugging while at the parachute club. One night, Els van Doren confessed to the younger Els that she was actually married with 2 children, and the younger Els had been shocked to hear this. She said that she loved her husband, but they had an understanding about what she did outside of the time that they were together during the week. Els van Doren was gone from the club for a little while in 2005 after having some issues with her back, which is when the relationship between Babs and Marcel started heating up. According to Babs, he started giving her constant compliments, and she blossomed under the attention that she was receiving. She said that she had suffered from very low self-esteem, and the attention that he gave her made her feel good about herself. One night while they were both staying overnight at the club, things went further between the 2 in a physical way. He started taking her out on dinners and asking her to stay over at his place. She said she felt bad for what she had been doing to her friend, but she had been catching feelings for Marcel and didn't know how to end it. She said that he kept pulling her back in. Marcel then made the plan of how he could see both of them at the same time. Babs would come stay with him on Fridays, and when Els came through on the Saturday, Els would then stay with him. He told Babs that Els would not suspect anything, and that Babs would need to keep it a secret. She said that she had a lot of guilty feelings, but the arrangement worked out well. She kept her best friend and the man that she was in love with by keeping up with the arrangement. He also made it known to Babs that if this had to ever come out, that he would choose Els van Doren over her. This is where she realized that she was always going to be number 2 to Marcel. Els van Doren's husband Jan and Marcel were completely eliminated as suspects by February 2007. They had complied with everything that the investigators had asked from them. There was no motive or evidence pointing to them whatsoever. Marcel and Jan both underwent a polygraph test. Now, as all us true crime enthusiasts know, a polygraph is inadmissible in court, but it does sure help pointing investigators in the right direction when they are taking. And of course, refusing to take one does not admit guilt, but definitely makes you look just a tiny bit suspicious. During the lie detector tests, Jan was asked whether he knew that his wife had been having an affair. He answered no, and the answer proved to be true. He was also asked whether he had anything to do with his wife's death, or whether he had anything to do with sabotaging her parachute. To both he answered no, which were proven to be true answers. Marcel was also asked several questions, of course the same ones, in whether he had anything to do with Els's death, or whether he sabotaged the parachute. All these answers also proved to be true. Els Klottemans, on the other hand, refused to take the lie detector test. Her lawyer stated, "She is already in custody and she is already a suspect. Why does she need to take a lie detector test?" The second excuse given was that she had been on medication for depression, and this could alter the results. She never ended up agreeing to taking the test. More testing of variables are done on the parachute. Several possibilities are tested regarding the cuts that had been made on the cords of the parachute. It was determined that the cuts were made with scissors, and that the person that had made the cuts was right-handed. It was determined that one cord of the main and reserve parachute was cut. The automatic opener for the reserve parachute was tested and seemed to be working. This automatic opener is set to open the reserve parachute at a certain height in case the jumper falls unconscious, is unable to open it themselves. But in Elsa's case, this did not happen. Her reserve parachute did not fully open. In the video, it is clearly seen that she tries over and over to pull the cord, but the reserve does not fully open. They come to the conclusion that the red piece of fabric that they saw flapping in front of Elsa's face in the video must have been a piece of ribbon, although they never found that piece of ribbon. That was used to cause a bag lock, which had prevented the reserve parachute from fully opening. By March 2007, Babs had now been in prison for 3 months. She is continuously questioned during this, sometimes for more than 16 hours on end, with psychologists and psychiatrists continuously called in to evaluate her behavior. In total, they recorded 85 hours of video, whilst they had been questioning Els Klottemans. The investigation seemed to be going nowhere though. Els is not budging, she does not admit guilt. After a while, Els refuses to be questioned any further. She made a statement saying, "These police officers continuously harass people that I know and tell them that I'm without a doubt the killer. They are belittling me in front of people that I know and tell them negative things about me with only one objective. They are trying to isolate me from everyone, destabilize me, and they are trying to make me crack." Of the anonymous letter, at first she stated that she knew nothing of it, although she had later admitted to Marcel in her letter that she wrote when she wanted to end her life, that she had written the anonymous letter that was sent to Els. They questioned her about the phone calls that had been made anonymously to Els and Marcel. She immediately admitted that it was her, because Marcel had noted that the number had been hidden when the calls had been made to him and Els, but he kept the calls on his phone and handed it over to the police. They traced it back to a public payphone in a train station that Babs had regularly used to get home from where she studied. She had admitted to it because she had been afraid that there had been video footage of her making the calls at the times. The finding of the pilot chute was investigated and looked into more. Babs had jumped out of the plane later than all the others. Data was recovered from Babs's AAD that stated that she pulled her parachute while the others were still in freefall, which meant that she would have stayed higher in the air floating. That way she was able to see everything happening below her and could follow the path of the pilot chute and see where it landed. She had apparently also gone looking for the chute on the 19th, one day after the death of Els, as Marcel had told her that it was a very important component and would be able to give the police more information of who the culprit might be. They tracked her phone to being around the area during that day, but what they suspected was that she thought to look for it so she could hide it when she found it, but she did not think that it would be 20 meters up in a tree, and she was not able to get it out. She told the police that she was trying to help them, which was why she had been looking for it on the 19th. Babs had been in her second year of studies when she had been arrested. She studied further whilst being incarcerated. She was kept in jail for more than 377 days without being convicted. Whilst the investigation was still ongoing, she received her diploma while she was incarcerated. Her lawyer successfully argued to have her released on bail in 2008. Afterwards, she was working as a teacher at a school in Anderlecht, and her colleagues and students loved her. Els Klottemans' trial started on 24 September 2010. She was then 26 years old. The 68-page indictment read out by the prosecutor stated that there was enough evidence for the murder charge. He said, "As a skydiver, she had the knowledge and opportunity to sabotage the parachute. On top of that, she had a relationship with Marcel, who also had a relationship with the victim, which gives her motive." Her chief defense lawyer stated that the prosecutors have nothing but circumstantial allegations, as there had been no hard physical evidence. He said, "I read no guilt and I see no guilt. We will not deny that Ms. Klottemans had some problems, but she certainly is not a psychopath." The lawyer for the Van Doren family said, "The first question a family normally asks is whether the victim suffered, whether she knew what happened. We don't have to ask. It was filmed. Try to deal with that as a family." The evidence presented at the court trial was circumstantial evidence. No physical DNA evidence was found that pointed directly to Els Klottermans. Els testified by saying that she did not see a future with Marcel. She was sleeping with him due to her low self-esteem, and nothing more. She was not looking to take him away from Els Van Doren. So the motive of her trying to steal him away by taking Els out of the picture was simply not the truth. She stated that she had been accused for 4 years of doing something that she had 100% been innocent of. During the trial, the jury, the Van Doren family, the lawyers, the judge, and Els Klottermans took a trip through the streets and visited key points of interest to the case, like the garden where Els had died, the place where the pilot chute was found, and the Zwartberg Parachute Club, so that everyone could form a better idea regarding the evidence provided. During the trial, the court is shown videos of Els Klottermans during interrogations. During these interrogations, she shows little to no emotion, sympathy, or empathy. In one video, she points the finger to Els Van Doren's daughter as a suspect. Without batting an eyelash, she accuses the then 15-year-old. "I would continue to investigate the man's daughter. As bad as that sounds, that girl was upset because her mother was gone every weekend. Maybe she knew how a parachute works. I can imagine that Els showed her children. Beware, I accuse no one. I just want to indicate the possible suspects," she stated to the investigator. In these videos, she looks down upon her interrogators. She sneers as if they are lesser beings. She comes across as a self-centered person who doesn't listen to others, who doesn't discuss. Instead, she speaks in a hard, aggressive way, an arrogant manner, letting no one else speak, continuously lying and attacking her interrogators when her contradictions are caught. More than a dozen times, she refuses to be interrogated. She was also reported to have removed a psychiatric report on herself from a dossier during the interrogations. Els Klottermans states in a strong manner during one questioning, "Els Van Doren is dead and will remain dead. She will not return. I'm still alive, however, and meanwhile, I'm alone, broken, locked in a cell. I really do not know how long I will persevere. You have spoken constantly of Els Van Doren, but who is worse off? The children of Els still have a father, and Jan de Wild has his children." Of her continuous visits to Marcel after Els's death, she said, "I have filled the void after the death of Els. I stayed with hugging and kissing. More than that has not happened. The day after Els's death, I drove to Eindhoven, to Marcel, not to cuddle, not at all, but to comfort him, since we both needed it." Els's husband spoke for the first time in the case during his testimony in court. He said, "My whole world came crashing down on 18 November 2006. First the police came to say my wife was killed. The next day they come by to say she had an affair for years, which I had not been aware of. And then the final hammer blow, I myself was regarded as a possible suspect." He stated, "I do not know how I have explained all of this to my children. You cannot explain. You explain that she's dead, but murder? How?" He stated that what caught him off guard when he went to the parachute club to collect Els's belongings was that Els Klottermans was not as sad as the rest. The next day she came to his house to give him a prayer card, and he asked her about the affair that Els had been having. She told him that it had been with Marcel Sommer, and that Els was very jealous towards anyone that had interacted with Marcel, and that Babs herself was not allowed to bring over any female friends to Marcel's apartment at the request of Els. He told Babs to get out and that he never wanted to see her again, as she was speaking ill of the mother of his children. He said that the parachute club were informed that they had not wanted them to attend Els's funeral, but Klottermans and 2 others arrived at the funeral anyway. Babs asked to be alone with Els's body, but he had refused the request. She had stood to the side and watched him, and when he was speaking to someone and his head was turned away from her, she took the opportunity and went to go stand with Els's body. The last person to see Els that day was Babs. Marcel had also testified in court. he said. Els van Doren was the love of my life. With her, I was happy. The relationship with Babs occurred naturally. I can hardly explain it. When he was asked, how would you react if someone called you a bastard for having begun a relationship with a young woman when he was found, as he said, the love of his life, he stated, let he who has never sinned cast the first stone. He stated, I don't think Els van Doren ever knew anything about Babs. Babs had all the strings in her hand. She could have informed the husband of Els, of mine and Els's relationship at any time. By initiating a relationship with me, Els van Doren had everything to lose, but I had nothing to lose. Jan never knew, I'm 100% certain, that Jan is not the author of his wife's death. We've both passed a lie detector test, and this test lasting 3 or 4 hours was very hard. He also said, I told Babs repeatedly that Els was my number 1 and Babs came in second place. I had never asked Babs to my house. If this situation did not please her, she could go at any time. I was aware that this situation did not please Babs. Of the weekend of 10 to 12 November, he said, she was not very happy to hear the sounds that came from the bedroom when I was in bed with Els. I believe that the weekend of 10 and 11 November, Babs was so stressed by the noises from the room that she sabotaged the parachute. Way to toot your own horn while Els's husband is in the courtroom, dude. Like, I was such a great lover that she got so upset and cut the parachute's cords. Anyway, he said that Els van Doren remained at his place until Sunday, November 12. That same evening, Klottemans, who had left on the Saturday, unexpectedly showed up again in Eindhoven. She waited outside until Els van Doren left. Suddenly, she stood at my door. She was half-dressed and jumped out at me. She seduced me, and we slept together. This man was just with his mistress, making all sorts of noises apparently, and then he is seduced by this other woman. Let's just not say anything about that. He told the court that after 20 years of skydiving, he does not do it anymore. He said that his joy was stolen the day that Els had died. At the end of his testimony, he said, I'm not the author of her death, but the catalyst in this relationship of us 3. Unfortunately, I can't go back to change what I did. When asked why he thought Els Klottemans did what she did, or whether she was the murderer, he said, I'm not a psychologist. I think she's crazy. She's ill. That is my belief. Martine de Keugel, Els's mother, also testified in court saying, Els is innocent. Els van Doren committed suicide. Els is innocent. She stayed in prison for a year. When she got home, it was hell. Every door that closed and the sound thereof reminded her of prison. I beg you think too that she is innocent. Carol van Doren, Els's daughter, left the court abruptly in tears when Martine blatantly claimed that her mother had committed suicide. On 20 October 2010, Els Klottemans was found guilty of the murder of Els van Doren. The jury also found that the murder had been premeditated. On 21 October, Els Klottemans was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The judgment stated that she could apply for early release on good behavior after serving a third of her sentence, which came down that she could apply after 10 years.
Klottemans was driven by jealousy to murder. The 26-year-old teacher was infatuated with her skydiving instructor, but he was also having another affair with this woman, Els van Doren. The love triangle ended in tragedy.
Veroordeeld, Klottemans Els voornoemd, hier aanwezig.
Passing a 30-year sentence for murder, the judge said the only mitigating factor was Klottemans' unstable mental state.
12 members of the jury, together with the 3 members of the court, came to a consensus of 30 years punishment. The maximum penalty or sentence for this type of crime, murder, is lifetime. So they had to accept mitigating circumstances.
Klottemans killed Van Doren by making her fall to her death. In 2006, both women took part in a jump. 12 parachutists leapt from the plane. The 2 friends were among the last, but unknown to Van Doren, her parachute cords had been cut Her emergency chute had also been sabotaged. The jury was shown footage shot by her helmet camera as she desperately looked upwards to the skies for a parachute that would never open. She crashed 30,000 feet into this garden. During the month-long trial, the jury was told Klotmans was an experienced skydiver who could easily disable a parachute. A psychiatrist analysed Klotmans to be psychopathic and manipulative. She had attempted suicide a month after killing her love rival. Throughout the trial, Klotmans protested her innocence. The jury accepted that the prosecution presented no proof in their case, but the circumstantial evidence was so overwhelming, Klotmans was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 30 years behind bars.
Jan de Walt noted that the family had refused for 4 years to give statements or interviews, taking care to allow Els Klotmans to have a fair trial. He condemned Klotmans for not doing the same. He stated, "Klotmans played the media. We were angry about what was said in the press over the past 4 years, but we did not respond. We are now not concerned with what is being said after the trial. I understand the media interest continues. Investigators have done a great job. I would also like to thank the President of the Court for the humane way with which he has led the debate on this difficult issue, particularly during my children's testimony. I thank the jurors for the attention they have paid in this case, and for daring to take responsibility in the deliberations on both the guilt and the sentence. I believe that the rights of the defense have been equally respected, and that the accused was entitled to and received an honest trial. The Attorney General has invested in the search for truth, and the law prevails." Of Martine de Kirchel, Els Klotmans' mother, he said, "I would defend my children to the end. I understand his situation, except the totally false statement that she said my wife would have committed suicide." Speaking of the double life of his wife, Els van Doren and Marcel, he said, "I do not approve of the adultery of my wife, but she did not earn to be murdered." Of Marcel, he said, "You should not touch a married woman. It's totally wrong what he did. I have had no contact with that man." On a final word on his wife Els, he said, "Finally, I wanted to say I was extremely pleased with Els, to the last day. We miss her terribly, as my children have had said during their testimony. Els is not a victim, but the most wonderful mother that they could imagine. And for me, for 20 years, she has been a lovely woman." He then asked the press to leave the family alone, to finally try to grieve in peace. On 4 May 2011, Klotmans lodged an appeal against her conviction, and claimed that there had been procedural errors in her trial. The Court of Cassation in Brussels ruled that claim was unfounded. After everything the Van Doren de Walt family had gone through, they remained so gracious through all of this. I cannot even imagine having to find out within a matter of 3 days that your significant other, number 1, had died, number 2, that she had been having an affair for more than 5 years, and number 3, that she had been murdered. Then remaining quiet and not saying anything to the press for 4 years. I really do take my hat off to them. I hope that through all of this and with the guilty verdict that they had found peace, and that they had the time to finally close the chapter of what had happened, and fully grieved as a family. As always, let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. And thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye.